Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing this afternoon? I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you're just now taking your seat, that's totally fine. My name is Chris Nickel. I'm the Senator's Deputy Chief of Staff. I'm really excited to see you all today. We are going to ask for everybody to move forward a little bit if you're able, just because we want you to be able to experience this presentation the best possible. So come on forward if you're able. I think just a brief outline for the way this afternoon is going to go. We're going to hear from some elected officials who have joined us this afternoon, and then we're going to get right into our presentation. We're going to discuss the work that Senator Jackson has done on legislation in Albany and the budget process that just finished up recently, and then we're going to move to discuss local issues in the community in District 31. And we're going to wrap up by speaking about some of the issues that are facing the Senator for the rest of the legislative session that lasts through the third week of June. So that's sort of a brief overview. We'll have a bit of a presentation going on. There's coffee and tea, thanks to B'nai Jeshurun, our gracious hosts, and we'll have some cookies to enjoy after the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Borough President Gale Brewer, who has taken time out of her very busy schedule to deliver a few words today. Borough President.
Thank you very much, Chris. It is wonderful to be here, and some of you know that in the City Council I served with RJ, as we call him, so that he is a senator is a whole other world for me. And we had offices right next to each other. He knows this story, and in that particular case I had too many interns, and we put an illegal Wi-Fi apparatus in the hallway so that we could put interns into the hallway. And then we had tables and chairs in the hallway, and poor Robert Jackson had to step over all of my interns to get to his office, and he did so with a great deal of cheer. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm a big Robert Jackson fan. I look forward to what he's got to say about what's going on in Albany. There are a few things that we're working on that I think you will be also appreciative of. One, of course, Robert Jackson knows a lot about the schools, and I know he'll tell you all that he has done. But in our situation, we're working on several aspects. Number one is the issue of the technology. I come from the tech community, chaired the technology committee, and it is really frustrating that in so many of these schools there's not enough bandwidth to be able to get the kind of instructional that the students need. We also, just like all of you, want every single school to have the full depth of the arts, and you'd think that was true, but it's not. We also want every single elementary school, particularly Title I, to have after-school programs, and a lot of them don't, particularly in the younger grades, and that means that folks tend to go to charter schools because when you're working, you gotta have a full day. And finally, just the whole issue of food. Last night I go to a lot of the auctions, and I was actually at a school, really good school the other day, at an auction, and the principal was stating she doesn't know how to get the food to be something that the kids want to eat. Now I know you think that should have been dealt with in 2019, and we do work a lot on food issues, trying to get fresh fruits and vegetables, not only to the schools, but to all of the city agencies. But this is still a challenge. Number two, something that Chris Giordano and others know well, we are working and have been advocating to get rid of the mechanical void loophole so that buildings in general do not go up to the sky. They're going to go to the sky. They darn well should not have floors and floors and floors of what I would consider fake floors. They're empty. They're just waiting to get a higher floor that they can charge more for, and they stick these voids in there that should not be there. So the city planning is going to vote the way we want them to vote. On the other hand, there's still more to be done. This is just the beginning of the discussion, so I want to mention that. It seems like in 2019 we shouldn't be doing that, but we are. Another issue we've been working on, no surprise to you, is just the whole issue of affordable housing. In the Borough President's office, we work on land use and zoning. We appoint about 1,000 people every year, community boards, hospital boards, school boards, environmental boards. But the issue of affordable housing, whether in a district office on 125th Street or anywhere, is just not meeting the need. I don't need to tell you that. We're all going to have to deal with congestion pricing. I'd love to hear some of the challenges or benefits that you here in the community feel. I know that 60th Street itself as a divide is going to be a challenge. On the other hand, we have to figure out how to pay for the subway. We're also working on vacant storefronts. I've been working on this since 1985. And to the credit of Speaker Johnson, finally had a hearing on the bill that Ruth Messinger wrote in 1985. And I think there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. 3 aspects. Number 1, will pass a bill that I sponsor along with Johnson and Rosenthal and Levine that says every empty storefront has to put it into a database. We don't have the data. In our office, we work from the bottom to the top of Broadway, and we found 188 storefronts that are empty, but that's just walking. It's not data. So that data bill, I think, will pass. When you have the data, then we can figure out what needs to be done. But in San Francisco, successfully, I know San Francisco is much smaller, but successfully, they have eliminated in some communities, based on the community wishes, the chain stores. And secondly, stores that are legacy stores where they've been there for 20-some years or more, those stores are written in to maintain at a certain percentage increase. Nothing terrible has happened in San Francisco. It has improved the mom and pop opportunities in that city. So these are some issues. We have a small business task force. We're looking at all of these. And I want to congratulate the city council because I think these ideas or others will be something that's going to happen. I did pass, when I was in the city council, a bill that zoned so that banks can only be 25 feet long, Columbus and Amsterdam stores, new, can only be 40 feet long. But the ones that are there, I can't change. We're also working on NYCHA, right here on 90th Street. Wise Towers is a city-state development, not a federal. So along with other developments, I am concerned. NYCHA, we all hear about the challenges, but what about the future? So there's something called PACT, which is the overall way in which NYCHA is going to take the city and state developments and put them into a public-private partnership. It sounds good, but I'm not interested in it unless it's a nonprofit working as a manager in the future. And so that's something that we're working on. Is challenging. I also want to mention that in terms of seniors, we're always very supportive, as you are. I know that in cases we've been working, a couple of issues. One, we tried to have from the bottom of Manhattan, started here at Garden Riverside. Every single senior who wants it can get an $8 bag of fresh fruits and vegetables during the growing season, and that's been very successful. We also work a lot with the Norks, and we try to work with in city council in the city of 108th Street and 85th Street. Westside Federation of Senior Housing is building and supporting affordable housing for low-income seniors and families. So I just want to thank all of you for joining me here today. Those are just some of the issues that we're working on. As you know, I live on the west side. I love our neighborhood, and I love RJ. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Borough President. We're going to touch on some of those very same issues in our presentation, specifically the mechanical voids and the important small business issues. So I'm going to welcome up folks in the order that I saw them come in. So Assemblymember O'Donnell, would you like to come say a few words for us? Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to be back in this extraordinary space. The last time I was here was for a bar mitzvah, but anyway. So first of all, I want to thank Senator Jackson for doing this because I now have an ally in the state senate who I can rely upon. The previous state senator never set foot in this part of my district, ever, for 2 years. Even when I begged her to do so, she just didn't. So Robert and I are great allies in Albany. It's a frustrating place to work. So let me start by explaining Silver v. Pataki. It's a Court of Appeals decision that says that the legislature only can accept or reject a budget item. It can't modify it. And why is that a problem? Well, many people, some of them in this room, demanded we put congestion pricing in the budget, demanded we put campaign finance in the budget. And you know what that means? That means we have no, in the legislature, ability to modify what that is. And that's dangerous which is why I oppose putting those things in the budget. They should be standalone pieces of legislation where Mr. Gottfried and I and others can say this is the right way to do that, this is not the right way to do it. So now we have these two major things about to change our city and the way our state runs elections, and we've handed it off to a group of people that we have no control over, that you can't vote for. That is very, very disturbing to me. Very, very disturbing to me. Similar to Ms. Brewer, I have a Small Business Survival Act in Albany. I also have a bill that will take away the tax breaks for landlords to leave their storefronts vacant. Currently, they can write that off of their taxes, so I have a bill to change that, to try to change that throughout the state. I also am working with Columbia University. Obviously, for-profit institutions, landlords have greater power, but the Columbia University has dozens of vacant storefronts that they own. And that's where I live. I live at 111th and Broadway. And in the end, I think that we need to exert pressure on institutions to behave differently than for-profit landlords. And I said to them basically, I don't care if you have to give those spaces away. You find out what the community needs and you put them in those spaces rather than just leaving them vacant. And that's also true further uptown at Columbia. So it's something that my office is working very hard on. I'm not going to take a lot of time. There's a lot of elected officials here. I guess they know that these are the people who vote. So I'll let some of them others speak, but I want to thank Senator Jackson for allowing me to be here. We will be together tomorrow at a housing forum at PS 75. Please come on by. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember O'Donnell. And I'd like to also welcome your colleague, Assemblymember Gottfried, who represents many of you in this room in this portion of the district, to say a few words.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm Dick Gottfried. I represent the parts of the district that are essentially in pieces of Hell's Kitchen and Chelsea. So the first thing I want to thank Robert Jackson for is getting elected. And he's not the only one. There are about, I guess it's like 15 new members of the state Senate, and in a body where a majority is 32, 15 is a lot. And I don't want to make sweeping statements, but I think without exceptions, they all represent a big improvement. Several of them, like Robert Jackson, replaced members of the so-called IDC, which kept the Republican majority in power in the Senate. Some of them defeated non-IDC Democrats who were kind of in the same boat, and quite a handful of them defeated or took the seats that had been held by Republican members of the state Senate. So we now have, we've had a Democratic majority in the Assembly for a long, long time. We took that majority in 1974 in the Watergate landslide. But in the Senate, we now have 39 Democratic senators. The last time there was a Democratic majority that large in the New York State Senate, it was in 1914. And every time I mention a date, people say, oh, gee, Dick, were you there? No. My parents had not been born yet. But it's been a while since we have had such strong Democratic control in the legislature. And they're not just Democrats, they're much more so than ever before. They're energetic. They're people who are politically independent. They're people of color. They're an awful lot of them, more than ever before, are people in their 20s and 30s. And an awful lot of them, more than ever before, are women. And that's true both in the Senate and in the State Assembly, where we've had enormous turnover in the last 2 or 3 election cycles. More than half the Democrats in the State Assembly arrived in Albany in 2013 or later. And that's a pretty hefty rate of turnover. So what's been the result? Well, the Reproductive Health Act that codifies in New York law all of the provisions of Roe v. Wade dealing with abortion. Almost all of those provisions were already in New York law, but this adds a couple of more guarantees. We've been passing that in the Assembly for quite a while. It's never gone anywhere in the Senate. In the first month of the session, it passed both houses and was signed by the governor. Gender, the bill to extend the human rights laws provisions to transgender New Yorkers, a bill I've been carrying since, I think, '02, passes the Assembly. It's passed the Assembly, I think, like 10 times. This year, it passed both houses and was signed by the governor. We've strengthened our gun laws, which were already about the strongest in the country, but they're now even stronger. All of our rent laws are due to come up for renewal in June, and usually when the rent laws are up for renewal, rent-regulated tenants and people who may not be rent-regulated tenants but support the rent laws and understand how vitally important they are to New York. Generally, when those laws have come up for renewal in the past, we've all been kind of petrified. What are the state Senate Republicans going to try to extract in exchange for renewing the laws? Well, the debate has totally changed this year. Now the debate is all about how close to perfection are we going to get? How much stronger are we going to make the rent laws? Are we going to be able to enable communities outside New York City where they have similar housing problems in Rochester and Syracuse and Buffalo? Are we going to be able to empower them to enact rent laws? Which is not only important to the tenants in those cities, but important to us because the more housing in New York, the more New Yorkers come to know and love rent laws, the stronger our political case will be for those rent laws here in New York. We passed the legislation to outlaw single-use plastic bags, which is going to make a big difference for the environment. We're all going to get used to shopping with our own bags, which I think we're all going to be able to handle. Many of us can remember a time when there was no such thing as a plastic bag, and yet we were able to get food into our houses somehow. So we will learn that again. Here in the community, Robert Jackson and I and Gale and Danny and others who will be here have all been fighting against excessive development, against super tall buildings. We've had a particular problem, I know, in a lot of my district, and I imagine elsewhere, of landlords who are deliberately doing what they claim is construction work in their buildings to make life hell for their rent-regulated tenants to try to drive them out. And we've been fighting against that, both on a case-by-case basis and passing legislation to strengthen our laws against harassing tenants. We've passed one such bill like that in Albany to make it easier to prosecute landlords who are deliberately harassing tenants and endangering their lives and health. So those are some of the things we've been working on. I guess I should mention two issues. One, as you probably all know, we are working to try to allow adult use of marijuana in New York, which 10 or more states have now done. I passed the bill in 2014 that allowed medical use of marijuana. I'm now working with State Senator Liz Krueger and Crystal Peoples-Stokes from Buffalo, who is the majority leader in the Assembly, on their legislation to allow adult use. The simple notion of shall we allow adult use, I think if that was the only question, we would have done it by now. It's a complicated issue. There are a lot of moving parts. When 30 1933 when they, after Prohibition, when we created the alcohol industry, the legal alcohol industry in New York. It got to be a very complicated law because we wanted to make sure that small business owners could open liquor stores so that the liquor industry would not be all dominated by a few big national companies. And we've long succeeded in that. Similarly, in the case of marijuana, there is a lot of interest in making sure not only that small entrepreneurs can be involved in the business, but particularly that entrepreneurs from communities of color, low-income communities that have been the most damaged by the marijuana law will have an opportunity to fully participate in the industry. And that's keeping the industry and any industry from being dominated by huge, well-funded corporations is not easy. Last thing I'll just quickly mention is my bill, the New York Health Act, to create a single-payer health system for New York. We've passed it in the Assembly 4 years in a row with 2-to-1 margins. I hope we are going to do that again this year, and hopefully shortly we will have the Democratic majority in the state Senate passing the bill. It'll make an enormous difference in the lives of millions and millions of New Yorkers, not just the people who don't have health coverage, but those of us who have health coverage and who still find it difficult to see the doctor or the hospital that we want or to get the full bill paid. So I want to, again, thank Robert Jackson not only for giving all of us an opportunity to speak at his town meeting, but for being who he is and for getting himself elected. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. We have 2 more speakers to acknowledge. I want to invite up Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, followed by somebody who's made the trek all the way out from Brooklyn, Councilman Lander. So brief words from Councilmembers Rosenthal and Lander.
Emphasis on the Hey everyone, good to see you. Can you hear me? Is this mic working? Okay. I thought this was Robert Jackson's forum, so I will be exceedingly brief. And Robert, I just have to say thank you for doing something here on the West Side. Thank you for doing something here at B'nai Jeshua. They're an amazing partner. You'll find that their members are eager to be active in the community. So I'm Helen Rosenthal, I'm your council member, and this term chair of the Committee on Women. We've advanced a number of issues that I think have been incredibly important and helpful for the city, from passing groundbreaking legislation against sexual harassment in the workplace, to passing legislation to requiring the NYPD to pay attention to sexual assault victims / survivors, no easy feat, and a number of other issues. But I just want to tell you share with you how important it is to have a partner like Robert Jackson. I don't have to talk about the campaign for fiscal equity. Everyone knows the amazing work he's done there, and certainly he's my go-to person. As I'm a member of the budget negotiating team in the council and we're looking for details, I'm always calling and being in touch with his office. But I need to also let you know that he's a real champion for rent-regulated tenants, and in particular rent-controlled tenants. You're gonna see him in Albany fighting so hard for you and to make sure that the increases in particular for the rent-controlled tenants instead follow the rent-stabilized tenant increases, which are much lower. They've been out of control for too many years, and we have to protect our rent-controlled tenants as well as our rent-stabilized tenants. Now's the time we're actually going to be able to do it, and thank goodness Robert's going to be in the room, making sure that we hold everyone's feet to the fire, that we really do this year, finally, protect tenants. So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to see everyone. I'm always around, helenrosenthal.com. I'll see you later. Thank you again, Robert.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and to follow your wonderful Councilmember Helen Rosenthal. My name is Brad Lander. I'm a council member from Brooklyn and a big fan of your state senator, who, along with a lot of you, I worked hard to help elect. And the fact that he got elected along with this extraordinary class of new members with Alessandra Biaggi and Jessica Ramos and my new state senator, Zelnor Myrie and Andrew Gounardes, it's changing so much. It's like almost hard to think back to a year ago when the New York State Senate was the reason that so many things that are critical for all of us were impossible, and now they are at the forefront. So just what's already been done, quite remarkable. You know, it's like almost hard to think back to like January when they moved quickly to pass the Reproductive Health Act and protect Roe v. Wade, and my wife's the general counsel at Planned Parenthood in New York City, so we're so grateful for that. To get early voting and same-day registration done, incredible. And now to have the opportunity to protect tenants in ways that we've longed for years and years and years. And to have the State Senate at the forefront of that is remarkable. So thanks to you and your colleagues for leading the way. There's a lot else to do, obviously, and you know that RJ is going to be fighting for it. On winning campaign finance reform, on the Climate Protection Act, a lot to do. So we're really grateful for it. In the council, just a couple quick exciting things. First, this week, we're going to pass in our stated before Earth Day legislation that makes New York City the most aggressive in the country at requiring buildings to be retrofit for energy efficiency. An amazing bill. Buildings over 25,000 square feet will have to reduce their fossil fuel and energy use substantially by 2030 in a way that puts the city at the forefront. And in the same package, something I've been championing forever, we are finally dealing with and getting rid of plastic bags. And thankfully, Albany, they passed the ban on them. In the city, we're going to put a 5-cent fee on paper bags to give everybody an incentive to switch to reusable ones and just get rid of billions and billions of bags we don't need to send to landfill each year. And we're working really hard this spring also to deal with reckless driving. Another thing, the Senate, last year's Senate, took away our speed cameras and they got turned off and put our kids and our seniors and our families at risk. Those speed cameras are back on, the program is being expanded, and now we're working at the council to pass a Reckless Driver Accountability Act, because now we're able, with those cameras on, to know who the people are that are getting dozens of violations and really driving their cars in ways that are very dangerous for their neighbors. So all of those things are possible because the State Senate changed, because of leadership from RJ and his colleagues, and I'm so grateful for him, and to all of you, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
So without further ado, the man needs no introductions. I present to you State Senator Robert Jackson.
Hello. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate Chris is my Deputy Chief of Staff, and I would like to introduce, before I begin, Matthew Levy, this young man here, is my Policy Director. Gwendolyn, Gwendolyn, can you stand up? Gwendolyn handles my crazy schedule. Believe me, it is crazy. You have to be so organized to do that. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Leslie Espaillat is a community affairs person. And we have Talea. Talea is an intern. She's working on a master's degree. So she is helping us out doing research. Any other staff members? Oh, I didn't see Dario up there. Dario Quinsack up there. Dario is my special assistant. He was with me in the city council. We also have Joanna Garcia, who was my chief of staff. She was with me when I was in the city council. And Caridad Figueroa, who is a community affairs person. And I said to Joanna that I wanted to hire a veteran because I just felt that that's so important. Soldiers, these veterans have done so much to keep our country safe. So we were fortunate enough to hire Stephen Camillo, who's not here, but he's a vet and he's on board with our staff. To me, that's very important. Anyone else that I missed? Up in Albany, we have Bernie Mulligan, and we have a session executive assistant, Sue Weber, Shabazz. So that's basically all of the staff that I have in Albany here in New York City. But the bulk of them in New York City, and our office is located at 5030 Broadway. And you may say, where is that? It's so far up in the district, believe me, I don't particularly care for the location, but it's between 213 and 214th Street and Broadway. And I've been asking the state senate that deal with all of the real estate to move us further south. It would be better for me, and if not, we are going to have some locations on Upper West Side in advance so people know where I am. But also you can always call and email or text, and we will try our best to represent you. As I spoke to someone just a few minutes ago that was here, she wants to schedule a meeting with me. So I introduced her to Gwendolyn, my scheduler, and I said, okay, so tell me when the best times that you are available. And so we zeroed in on that, and I said, okay, then what I would do is I will come down here to the Upper West Side, and either we can sit in the park and have a meeting or sit in a coffee shop or something like that. Because I don't want to drag someone from here all the way uptown to 213th Street to meet with me. For me, I'll come and meet with you. I try to make it convenient for everybody. And that's important for me overall as a representative. So what I'd like to do is to give you an update what has occurred in Albany. And one of the things my colleagues, Gale, Helen, Dick, and Danny, and so I said to some of them, you had the opportunity, and Brad, to see some of the other representatives that don't represent you. And that's a good thing, because you get to hear what they have to say, and even though Dick and I and some of the others will be speaking about the same thing, but you're hearing it from them also, which is a good thing in my opinion. I had a town hall meeting Friday evening up at Isabella Geriatric Center, and Adriana Espaillat, who is our Congress member, some of us here, Adriana may represent us, but as you know, we have Jerry Nadler representing us also. And then Carmen De La Rosa, who represents the 72nd Assembly District, that I represent, she spoke, and Al Taylor, who represents the 71st Assembly District, and that's where I live. I live on 183rd in Fort Washington in the 71st Assembly District. So, and I think that that's a good thing, even though some people say, well, we came here to hear you, but I think for me, hearing from other people, you learn from them, and so it's a learning process. But let me just talk about some of the things that we talked about. So gender, obviously, and Chris, can you stand up for a second, Chris? Chris wears his name, but also he has the pronouns of they and them, because I cannot refer to Chris as he, because he does not identify himself as a he. And so I, as someone that's a lot older than Chris, I have to get used to respecting his wishes. And so even when I was on In Focus with Cheryl Will, I mentioned the fact that we passed the gender expression law, where no one can discriminate against you because of your gender or your non-expression. So I said that this is not 1920, this is 2019. And so we have to respect people for what they wish to be called. And thank you, Chris, for being on my staff and helping me to get used to communicating and introducing you to people. So thank you. And obviously, I think one of the first pieces of legislation was the Reproductive Health Act. And so many people talked about that when we were in the campaign mode. And as you know, that was one of the first pieces of legislation which codifies the abortion rights and removed the abortion from the penal code and mandates access to contraceptives and makes discrimination based on the reproductive health choices illegal. As I said, no one should tell a woman what to do with their body, okay? And so some people may disagree with me on that, and it's okay, because I've said that we're not gonna always agree, but I think it's appropriate, and and as far as the state Senate and the state Assembly also agreed, and now it's the law, and the governor signs it into law. And one of the things that to me was a no-brainer, especially in New York City, but in other parts of the state, it was a major issue, and that's the DREAM Act. I say to you that we have 39 members of the New York State Senate that are Democrats, and Simca Felder, my colleague from Brooklyn, he's a Democrat, but he has not been invited into the conference because he actually sat with the Republicans, okay? But hopefully, God willing, he will be invited back at a certain point in time. And one of the things I say to people, you never know when you will need one vote, and that vote will make the difference. And Simca and I were in the city council together. So I'm just going to digress for 1 second. So I sit in the back row, and who sits to my left? Simca Felder. But wait a minute, and then the Republicans sit on this side, and the Democrats sit over there, and I'm saying, wait a minute, why am I sitting over here on the Republican side? And I said that to myself early on in the process. And then I looked all the way down the last row. And so who's all sitting in the last row? All 15 new Democratic state senators. So all of us in the back row. And with Simca, so there's 16 of us actually sitting in the back, 15 newbies, new state senators, and Simca Felder. So I said, oh, that's okay then. But the Jose Peralta DREAM Act provides tuition assistance to undocumented students, and it broadens the eligibility requirements of tuition assistance program, TAP. But the total amount for undocumented residents as far as going to college is $27 million. And I say to you that some of our colleagues in their districts up in Rockland County and Ulster County, a lot of their constituents were saying, you know, we're working hard. Some of us are working 2 jobs or 3 jobs in order to help our children go to college. Why should we give, this is their terminology, illegal aliens money to go to college? So, and that's some of the things we realize, that everyone is not on the same page. And so we have to respect people and also look at one of the things that what we want to do, when I say we, the state Senate, is to maintain the majority that we have. And then hopefully to grow that majority in 2020. Because if we don't, then we will be back where we were before, where the Republicans were in control of the New York State Senate, and many things that impact us would not get done. So we realize how important it is in order to consider individuals that may not be as progressive as we are, but they're Democrats, and we want them back. And so understanding that, you have to be able to be willing to compromise on certain things. But then one of the things that we passed was the APPR, and that stands for the Annual Professional Performance Review. It begins to wean us off the high-stakes testing by unlinking the state exams with teacher evaluations. So even when we were discussing this, and I was saying, why should a physical education teacher, and you're in the gym, be evaluated on a high school social studies test? I'm sorry, if you're in the gym, why should you be evaluated on that? And why should an art teacher be evaluated on that? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, let's use some common sense approach. If I had my way, we would eliminate all testing to a teacher's evaluation. In my opinion, as a layperson, and I'm not an educator, I'm a parent activist, the assistant principal and principals should be evaluating the teachers in their performance as far as teaching and learning. And that's important, and not just by a test in a high school and you're in the middle school or you're in elementary school. That should not be the case. Election reform, as you know, we have passed some laws, and not all of them, because as I said earlier before, there's compromises in trying to move legislation. And you should know, people say, well, how come you didn't do this? How come you didn't do that? Let me tell you, easier said than done. Let me tell you that. And in fact, you need to know that Dick is in the Assembly. There's 150 members in the New York State Assembly, and there's 63 members in the New York State Senate. In both the Assembly and Senate, their one-house bills have to match one another, and then the governor has to agree and sign it into law. And so that's a process that takes place. And you may think it's easy, but it's not so easy. Let me just say that to you. So we moved on, obviously, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, the automatic transfer of voter registration after an in-state move, and consolidating the primaries to a single day, which is the fourth Tuesday in June. And obviously, like next year, for example, you have the congressional elections that will be the fourth week in June. You have the state Senate elections. You have the state Assembly elections. And I think you have, in New York County, you have state committee, and you probably have some county committee people or some judges, so it's going to be a long list next year. So this year was sort of a trial run, understanding that, and also, you know, we're getting ready with all of the early voting and same-day registration in order to deal with the big election, and that's for the presidency, obviously. So we've done a lot, but there's a lot more to do. So also with that voting, $40 million has been allocated. Obviously, same-day voter registration, no excuse absentee voting, early voting for 10 days prior to the election. And we have narrowed the LLC loophole in the whole electoral process from $5,000, what it is now, whereas before it was unlimited, where LLCs could just, if you had 100 LLCs, this man in the red, and so each one of your LLCs, you can give so much money, in essence, you can flood a campaign with millions and millions and millions of dollars in order to try to turn an election one way or the other. And that's, in my opinion, not how it should be. Gun safety legislation. As you know, we prohibited arming teachers and other staff in schools, and only security guards can have weapons at this point in time. I wish there was a situation where no one would have to carry any guns or any weapons. But we all know, we've all seen it on the news. It's unfortunate that mosques, synagogues, and other religious institutions and schools have to have armed security guards. And even though I say to you that it's really crazy out there in the world, and we need to promote peace and understanding with all people. When I went for a march for peace, and I found someone, I guess, throwing away their placard that they made, and it says, AR-15s are the choice to kill children. And that's crazy, but that's what it said on there. Because most of the people that are doing these mass killings are using AR-15. And I've said that if I was the President of the United States, I would ban all automatic AR-15 totally. You couldn't even own them. And then if you owned it, the government would have to buy it back from you to get rid of all of them. And then if in fact you kept it after we banned it, and after we said that we will pay you for what you paid for it, and you were caught having one, then you would go to trial. Because, in my opinion, those are weapons of mass destruction. And I don't believe that anyone should have a right to keep those if, in fact, we pass that law. And I say to you that when I was in my campaign office on 181st Street, this man came in, and he had a problem with that sign because I had it in my office. And so I was in the back making phone calls, and I heard him speaking loudly to one of the people on the campaign. And so I came up and I talked to him. So I said, well, I put that sign up, and I would ban them all. And I told him about it if I was the president. And anyway, we started to talk. And then outside, he basically told me he was a retired police officer. And, but I said, well, you know, you have a right to carry a gun, but I don't think that our country should have anyone having these automatic weapons. The bottom line, after a 5-minute conversation with him, we left on good terms, which is a good thing. But I do know that I say to you that if you disagree with me, I don't believe and I know that everyone is not going to vote for me, and that's okay. Do you know? In my opinion, that's okay. And everyone has their opinion. But as you know, we also passed the Crime Victims Act, which increased the statute of limitations for survivors of sexual assault. And as you know, one of the biggest religious institutions was the Catholic Church that was holding that back along with others. And now victims have a right to pursue legal actions against those that abuse them. And we expanded speed camera usage. As you know, you heard my colleagues talked about that. In school zones, if you drive near a school where they have cameras, it only goes off when you're 10 miles above the speed limit in the school zone. In the school zone, I think is what? Is it 15 or 20? I think it's 15. Dick, am I right? It's 15 in the school zone. And so you will get a ticket. In my opinion, that's a good thing because, you know, it's been proven by research that a car going 5 miles per hour faster really hurts people, whoever it is, children or adults. And so we need to slow up, especially. And in fact, on the news, yesterday or the day before, they're giving a public relations thing about making left turns. Because making left turns, they have that metal column, and so there's a blind spot there. And so the message is, especially when you're making left turns, slow down, because people are hit and killed as a result of that. And so we need to be able to slow down in order to make sure that people are safe. And I also say, besides drivers, pedestrians also need to be aware also and follow the rules. You know, like don't cross when it says don't walk and you got 3 seconds, 4 seconds left. And I've done it too, and I run across the street to make it. But, you know, we have to also not walk across the street looking at our cell phone and what have you and so forth, you know. So it's about all of us working together. And then, you know, we just passed a bill in the state Senate on religious garbs, making it illegal for employers to discriminate based on religious attire, clothing, or facial hair, intended to protect Sikhs wearing turbans, Muslims wearing hijabs, Jews wearing yarmulkes. It is illegal to discriminate against anyone because of their religious garbs. And that's part of the diversity of our great city and our great country, and we need to be able to respect that. And I was on the news with Chaim from Brooklyn, the city council member, and myself, and I say, when people say we need to tolerate one another, and I say no, to tolerate means that you go along with it, but you know, I think that we need to respect one another and to understand one another, and that's, in my opinion, a lot better than just tolerating one another. And that's just me, and that's important to me, to try to respect one another as human beings, because we're all brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters of this human race. And I say that, and I truly believe that. My back of my driver's license has a heart on it. That means if I'm brain dead, I want my organs to help somebody else live. I've given blood. I've given platelets. You know, platelets are important for burn victims especially. And so that's who I am as an individual, to try to make sure that we're all connected. And then there's a SCAR Act, which has not passed yet into law, but Brian Benjamin, who's also a state senator from the Upper West Side, the SCAR, what does that acronym stand for? Separated Children's Accountability and Reporting Act. And so basically, in New York State, organizations that have children that have been separated from their parents, we need to know how many children are in your facility or in your facility. And so that from an accounting point of view, we clearly should know that. And I believe that that is clearly going to pass. That should not be a problem at all. And then finally, I want to move to the budget process, if I may. But before I move to that, are there any questions from anyone on anything that I've just said before we moved on to the budgetary process? Yes, sir. Can we, Matthew, can you help, or Leslie, can you help with the mic if you don't mind? Just stand up, sir, if you don't mind, and let me give you this.
I'd like to ask you a question about something that someone else said earlier, which I believe is relevant to you.
Everyone can hear him, right? Okay, go ahead.
I think it was Mr. O'Donnell. He was saying that it's beneficial to landlords when the stores are vacant. I don't understand that, because you would think that when the landlord has a vacant store, he's not getting any rent money. So I'd like you to explain, if you can, why it's beneficial tax-wise for a landlord to have a vacant store.
You know, I am not 100% sure, but I will do a little research on that. I believe it's from a tax point of view. That's what it is. But
Right, but I want to know the details to understand it, because less income, if he's not collecting rent, he's not getting money. That's why I don't understand why it's beneficial.
yeah, I agree. And I think that I have to, Matthew and my staff are going to have to do a little more research on that so that I can be able to explain it. Because right now, I can't totally answer your question. But I tell you, on 181st Street, where that's my major thoroughfare, it's about a block from my house, there is space up above like a pharmacy and a lock store that's been vacant for like 20 years. And there's a sign up there, but I believe they've recently rented it, but for like 20 years it's been vacant. And you say, why? I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I will find that out, and if you give us your email, I'll make sure that we will email you the appropriate answer for that. Okay? So, yes, go ahead, please.
The Climate and Community Protection Act hasn't yet come up to the floor. Do you have any idea when it will be on the floor?
I know that is being discussed. I have no idea when it's going to come up on the floor. Now, mind you, as I said to you before, in order to move that into a law, the Assembly bill and the Senate bill has to match. And so if there's no match, what happens is then both houses get together in order to try to have one single bill in order to move to the governor. But the Climate Protection Act, my understanding that there are some other advocates that want removing fossil fuel much earlier than the CCPA. And so that's an issue. And in fact, in my opinion, we should move on it as quickly as possible in order to eliminate fossil fuel. In fact, I said to people, I went to an education press conference at City Hall about maybe 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and entering the gate at City Hall, there were these little kids, 3, 4, and 5, and they had signs about the Climate Protection Act. And I'm saying, little kids, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and they were with their teacher who homeschools these children. And they were out there protesting, about the fact that we collectively, the adults, are not moving on protecting the environment. So I hope soon, but I can't tell you when because no date has been put forward. I hope that it happens this term. Obviously, when I say this term, ideally, if it could happen like quickly, before we leave out of session, which is the end of June. But when I say term, is our term of office expires next year. So hopefully, Dick, do you have any additional insight on that?
I do not.
Oh, okay, okay. And that's from the Assembly and so from the Senate. But what I say to people is to keep putting pressure on all of us to move it. And that's important as constituents. Keep putting pressure on us, communicating with your state senator, your state assembly member, and the governor. That's important overall. And that's the type of pressure that we need overall. Anything else on what we've discussed already? Can we go, let's go 1, 2. Okay.
We need to get onto the budget.
Okay, quickly, 1, 2, 3, okay? 1 and 2, all right? Quickly, go ahead, Mitch.
The question is about the fiscal equity that I know you've been involved with. And I'm wondering, since the courts approved that schools should be given equal amounts of money, is it Governor Cuomo that's standing in the way of it, or?
Okay, good. So as far as the money for education, the proposed budget, executive budget by the governor was about rounded off to $950 million. And of that $950 million, everything for education, $338 million was foundation aid. And the lawsuit that I was involved with, that we won in 2006, Michael Rebell, who is an Upper West Sider, he filed another lawsuit in February 2016, going after the $4 billion that's owed to the New York State children. And so that's part of the foundation aid that we're talking about. So we were advocating for the one house of $1.2 billion the first year, and the Assembly said 1.1 something billion. So we were almost on the same page, the Assembly and Senate. But the State Board of Regents said 1.6 billion this year, and then phased in the rest of that 4 billion over 3 years. And the Commission of Education also agreed with the State Board of Regents, 1.6 billion. The governor basically said, all you're getting is 618 million of the foundation aid, the same amount that we received last year. So the total amount of foundation aid is basically the big pot of money, was 17.8 billion, I believe, and with the 600 million, it's 18.4 billion in foundation aid. It's not enough money to provide all of the children in New York State the opportunity to get a sound basic education. And just quickly, in Rochester, New York, which is the 8th poorest school district, not only New York State, but the country, they're missing almost $3,000 per student. Syracuse, New York, is missing about $2,100 per student, and that is the 10th poorest school district in the country. New York City, 1.1 million children, we're missing 1.5 billion. How much per student? About $1,500 per student. So that's some of the difference. So that fight and struggle continues, and basically, in my opinion, it's the governor that's holding it up. And people ask, well, where are we going to get the money from? And my response, it's in the budget. Our budget is $175 billion. And so all he had to do is phase in 1.6 this year and agree to phase in the rest over 3 more years. So the lawsuit that we filed in February 2014 is in discovery now, and we'll be going to trial. Okay, and this, quickly, go ahead, please.
Yes. Hi, I have 3 children in the New York City public school system, and my question is, what you mentioned about the teacher reviews, where you mentioned that a phys ed teacher wouldn't be responsible, the teacher review where the teacher's performance wouldn't be connected to the state, right, based on the state exams. Now, for the math and the English teachers, would that also be the case? Is anybody looking at the fact that there are some schools in the IBO report that I read that show 95% of students in some schools are getting passing grades in math and English, yet only 5% or 4% of students in in the same schools are passing the ELA and math state exams? I mean, is anyone looking at that?
I would think that the administration is, but quite frankly, those individuals passing or not passing is being evaluated by the teacher of that particular student. But what I was talking about is that the teacher is being evaluated based on the state regents exams, and so if an art teacher or a music teacher should not be evaluated on that. And so everyone should be evaluated based on their field. So if you're a math teacher, the assistant principal, or if you have a math coordinator in your school, should be looking at what you're doing and how your kids are progressing and whether or not you're teaching the correct information. That's how you should be evaluated on. But as you know, the APPR is part of the teacher contracts that they have, okay? So let's move to the next section. Let me introduce Joanna Garcia, who is the Chief of Staff. Joanna, say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Chris, where are we at? Budget?
Budget.
Okay. Budget, okay. So the budget overview, I say to you, let me just give you a quick little details. There's a pot of money that's available in the budget. And how much money is available? The governor tells us it's X amount of dollars, okay? And we all have to agree on that one. Who's we all? When we had talked about the three parties have to agree, the Assembly, Senate, and the governor. And so we did not agree because the governor said there's only $275 million available to spend. That's not a lot of money when you're talking about a $175 billion budget. And so when you don't agree, then it goes to the state controller. And the controller determines how much money is available. And so we did not agree, and the controller, Tom DiNapoli, said, no, there's more money available. There's $190 million more. So basically, the $275 million, which the governor said was available, that was split between two houses, both the Assembly and the Senate, and plus $190 million more. And the governor said that $190 million that the state controller said is available, he said he was going to put that in in escrow. And anyway, so negotiations took place, and the bottom line is at the end result was we reached an agreement on the budget, and many things I was not pleased with. So here's a couple of things I was not pleased with. The amount of money for education, I was not pleased with because it did not even meet the minimum requirement, in my opinion, to provide our children in New York State opportunity for a sound basic education. Another thing is for CUNY and SUNY, the higher education, the infrastructure is falling apart as a result of that. And understanding there's several things we agreed on a 2% property tax cap. So if you own a home outside of New York City, that is, okay, then your property tax is capped at 2%. And let me just tell you, that's a major issue in many places. And legislators from upstate are saying, well, as a result of that, you know, they are restricted as to what they could spend for their towns and villages and for their schools. And so besides a property tax cap of 2% in the rest of the state except New York City, there is a spending cap of 2% that the governor has imposed. And as a result of that, then you're limited on how much money is available to spend on the issues and concerns that impact you. And so obviously this is the first time that the Democrats were in a majority, and the governor, as you know, has been in office for 8 years, and so he's had a head start on doing priorities. When you look at the state Senate and you look at the 39 Democrats, none of us have been in a room before. So this is new. Andrea Stewart-Cousins, the first woman ever to be the majority leader of the New York State Senate, she's new at this. Even though she's been in the state Senate for about 8 years, but she's never been in the room with the governor and the speaker, okay? And so now she's in the room. So she's learning also. But we have done a lot as far as policy, and we're trying our best in the budget. One of the major issues was of the $550 million cut for health care. Major issue. And as a result of that, we restored that money for a total of about $642 million for health care, which is very, very, very important. And if you followed on the news as far as who spent the most money for lobbying, the governor and the legislators, the number one group that spent $642 million was Uber. And the second highest spending group to lobby the legislature was the hospital association, all of the major hospitals and what have you and so forth. But so basically we restored all of that money for how come I don't have a stand, Chris? I'm sorry. We restored all of that money for the health care. Let me see. And thank you, Joanna. And so with the TAP cap, the income threshold for TAP has been raised from $80,000 to $95,000. So as a result of that, now it's $15,000 more. So if you have a child in school and you you were at the cap of 80, now it's up to 95,000. And this was passed in the Senate and is waiting Assembly action. So the fiscal highlights is the $618 million for foundation aid, and the takeaway, the governor has turned his back on the children of New York State. Obviously, that was a big issue. And not only that, but the transportation. We agreed on congestion pricing, and Leroy Comrie is the chair of the MTA and authorities, and what's his name? Ted Kennedy from Buffalo is the head of the Transportation Committee. They've worked together. They held a hearing down here at 250 Broadway for over 3 hours, and I sat in on that committee hearing in order to hear what people had to say on that. And here's the bottom line. The main focus was two. One, to raise money for the MTA, and number two, to reduce congestion in Midtown. So I've given this example. Look at me. This is the Long Island Railroad here, and this is Metro North, and my body is the New York City transit system. If the New York City transit system is not working well, this is not going to work well, and this is not going to work well. So what agreements was reached on the funding? 80% of the money that we get as a result of congestion pricing will be used for the New York City transit system. 10% will go toward the Long Island Railroad, and 10% for Metro North. And we have to get in about $1 billion to bond out $15 billion in order to start with the first type of work that we need to do. In my opinion, Andy Byford, I think, is doing a great job. I think he needs to be given the tools to do it. Quite frankly, I think the end result is going to be more than $60 billion. Realistically, it'd probably be about $80 billion, because literally we have to change all of the signals and everything throughout the entire system. We have to make sure that the rails are all in place, and bring new cars in order to move people around. So obviously that this is extremely important. People had talked about with the cannabis and marijuana law that some money could go to that also, but that's not even been dealt with as of yet. So right now the most important thing is the mass transit and the congestion pricing. Carve out. If you live on Upper West Side and you own a car and your income is under $60,000 a year, that's a carve out for you, for the people that live in the congestion zone. And obviously the FDR Drive, as long as you stay on it, or the West Side Highway, as long as you stay on it, that you won't have to pay. But obviously when you look at the West Side Highway, FDR Drive is a highway. But once you get off at 57th Street, you're basically literally in the streets now. And so I don't know how they're going to do that. There's going to be so many, I guess, exit points where you will be tagged in. I just think that that's a good thing overall. I've heard in the news that police officers, they want to carve out that they should not have to pay. And obviously, if you're talking about police, who else are you talking about? You're talking about fire, you're talking about emergency EMS. In my opinion, in my personal opinion, they coming to work like everyone else, they should pay like everyone else, in my opinion. I mean, one thing is that, all of these carve-outs, the main goal and objective was to raise the money to bond out to get the New York City subway system where it is. I mean, obviously, yes, they are police officers and firefighters and in essence emergency workers, but to come to work, they don't necessarily, they can come to work by public transportation like a lot of us also, in my opinion. Where we at, Joe? Sure. So in the summertime, Joanna said Senator Ted Kennedy is coming to New York City to visit our area and probably have a town hall meeting with him and Leroy Comrie. Housing. There's been an allotment of about $20 million for Community First program to prevent foreclosures and provide community stability for consumers. Where's page 7? And so also there's been an increase of about $8 million for the New York State Office of Rent Administration, the Tenant Protection Unit, because of many tenants that are rent stabilized and rent control have complained that the tenant protection unit needs to be staffed up. And so $8 million has been agreed to in the budget for that. But, you know, trying to keep people in their homes is so important in the process, because if people are evicted or lose their homes, and then they have to go into shelters, it's going to cost the city a whole lot of money. So the most important thing is to try to keep people in their homes. But since it's 2020, there's been $20 million allocated for that, even though the ask was for $40 million. So we need to be fully prepared to deal with that. $20 million is not enough. Adriano Espaillat, our Congress member, is having, I guess, a town hall meeting somewhere in the district, and I don't know where as of yet, with Julie Menon, who's been appointed by Mayor de Blasio to be the point person on the census. And you know how important that is, right? Everyone, no matter who you are, whether you're a citizen or you're an undocumented resident, everyone needs to be counted, because that means we get more federal money in the long run. So we ask everyone to please cooperate with that. In criminal justice, we removed the cash bail for most misdemeanors. So almost all of misdemeanors have been removed from cash bail. So for example, if you jump the turnstile or you robbed the store for some meat in order to eat and bread, no bail. You're on your own. Just show up to court the next time you're supposed to come. But except two things. One, except sex offenses, and except criminal contempt following domestic violence. Those two are not exempt for, you know, no bail. Yeah, the nonviolence. And nonviolent felony offenses, that if they're nonviolent felony offenses, there's no cash bail. But if I rob you and I knock you upside your head and injure you, in my opinion, that individual that does that, they need to be on bail or be held in detention, because he's hurting you. He's hurting people. And anyone that hurts someone, we're not going to accept that. We should not accept it as a society. Do you know what I mean? But also, you know, part of that is we reformed the speedy trial provisions of the procedural law, where we made the exchange of discovery in criminal cases quicker. So now, if in fact you're indicted for a charge and you have an attorney, the DA has to hand over all the material within 15 days, so your attorney would know what type of case they have against you. So, for example, if they know they have all of the goods on you, and your attorney then talks to you, and you say, well, let's settle this case if we can. But what's been happening is that they've been holding on to all of the information and not giving it to the defense attorney until right before trial. And that's not good, in my opinion. That's not good. You should be able to know the information against you in order for you to deal with it. And yeah. And then also, the Commission on Public Financing of Elections, is frustrating that we weren't able to pass public financing of elections. I'm committed to make sure that this commission gets the job done so we can get into the 2020 with public financing. And everyone's talking about, especially the advocates, Josh, we're looking for what? Small donations. Is that correct, Josh? Matching funds. Where's that piece of paper you had, Josh? Josh Karen is an activist in Northern Manhattan, and you may have seen him outside. He was handing this out, and basically what it says is, get big money out of politics, okay? So if you haven't received this, you can see Josh when this is over and get a copy. Basically, small matching dollar funds. I'm used to the matching funds in New York City, okay? And we're trying to get that in New York State to get big money out of politics. I hope it happens. I will be advocating for that myself, okay? I talked about the red light cameras, the ban on single-use plastic bags, and the 5-cent opt-in for counties if they want to charge 5 cents for paper bags. And obviously, people said, well, what about, okay, so wait a minute, what about New York County and Bronx County and Queens County? In essence, in New York City, we have 5 counties. New York City will be considered as one county, as far as, you know, if in fact paper bags will be 5 cents. And we hope that what that would mean, 40% of that money of the paper bag fee will go back to the municipalities to help distribute reusable bags, and 60% will go towards the Environmental Protection Fund. And that's important overall. Okay? Sure. So can we move to services in the district, or can I take 1 or 2 questions on, can we take questions on the budgetary process, anything that I said, anyone? Yes, sir.
I'm loud. I just want to speak about the congestion pricing, and that 10% of the money went to Metro North. There was only 3.5% of the riders in the MTA system. That 10% of the money should be used to help them run subway priced service from the Bronx and nearby Westchester, because otherwise you will not be able to get on the #1 train anywhere in the district. Almost it'll be filled. Even today, there are 12 buses an hour going into the 242nd Street, Van Cortlandt Park Station from Westchester. Only 2% of the people in the Bronx take Metro North. It's way overpriced for them. Same thing with the Long Island Railroad in Queens. Only 2% of the Queens residents take the Long Island Railroad. That 10%, that $100 million a year that's going to go to Metro North, should be used for the transit deserts, so we're not wiped out here on the west side, and the people in the Bronx get a fair deal.
See, well, I remember what I talked to you before when I talked to everyone about the negotiations. You have the people on Long Island, and they're saying that they need to be able to get that, and we need everyone to agree. And so now, mind you, the governor's involved in this also. So that was the agreement that was reached. It is what it is. In order to move the agenda, sometimes you have to give and take.
Let Metro North have the money, but make them use it to help the poorer people in Westchester and the poorer people in the Bronx by lowering their fares, so they take Metro North. Here's a chart. I don't know if you can just see there's a big green in the middle.
Yeah.
That's the only hour where Grand Central Station is used at capacity.
And what time is that?
Between 8 and 9 a.m. in the morning. Any other time of the day, there's room for a dozen more trains. The people in the Bronx will go an hour early if you give them a reasonable price. Same the people in Westchester.
Okay.
They just don't want to help the poor people. I checked yesterday on the Metro North capital plans for expenditures. They're busy ordering bar cars for the New Haven line.
So the commission is going to be, let me have, if you can give me a copy of that. But the commission, okay, the commission, when they have their hearings, obviously we need to all come and give testimony about that. Okay, yes, miss, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I want to make a comment about the police officers and firemen, emergency.
The possible call-out, you mean?
Right. I absolutely agree that they should pay their fair share, and I'll tell you why. The very strong unions, a lot of them have free parking plaques, and that's one of the issues with de Blasio, and they have been very abusive, at least in my district. I live on 42nd Street. You have the cops that park in the bus stop. So I have to go into the middle of the street to access the bus because they have the NYPD plaque and very arrogant about it. So they have free parking to come into the city. A lot of them live out of the city. They don't pay taxes in the city, but they want all the benefits. You get good salaries, you have strong unions that fight for those things. Yes, they should pay their fair share. No disrespect to, we appreciate their service, but pay your fair share.
I express to you my opinion, and I agree with you, but even de Blasio and everyone is saying we have to crack down on placard abuse. They should not be parking in the bus lane. They should not, and no one, and I have a placard also. My car is right outside here. I brought the equipment in for this town hall, and that is no parking, it's a white sign. So with my placard, I'm allowed to park where the white signs are. Red, no standing anytime? No. Hydrants? Absolutely not. Crosswalks? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? And so one thing is appropriate use of placards, and another thing is abuse, and we have to crack down on the abuse. But in my opinion, you know, if they're coming into the city, I don't think that they should get a free ride. But I know the union would disagree with me on that. That's okay. Anybody else quickly? Shall we move on? Okay, let's move on, John. District, you want to take this part? I'm going to let Joanna take over. Do you mind? Get some water.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being so accommodating. Speak up. Okay. Hold the mic higher. Sorry?
Could you identify yourself?
Oh, yes. The senator introduced me briefly when I came in, but again, my name is Joanna Garcia. I'm the chief of staff for Senator Jackson. I worked as the chief of staff for then council member Robert Jackson. So I am familiar with the wear and tear of the job, and yet I applied again and here again because I love public service. And it's a pleasure to work, as always, with the community. Services and events, you heard a little bit, and again, it's just really a snapshot of what's been going on in Albany in regards to the budget and legislatively, but we did want to share what's been going on in the district because the staff has been very busy while the senator is in Albany, and we keep him busy when he's back in district. So. He has spoken about running for office at a workshop hosted by Teachers College. He's joined his colleagues at a 3-hour Manhattan Senate delegation budget hearing that was hosted by Senator Liz Krueger. He honored Dominican Heritage Day and International Women's Day by hosting a screening of Caribbean Fantasy by the talented Dominican filmmaker Joanne Gomez Terrero, who joined the senator for Q&A and a reception. He's attended marches and rallies and hearings for various issues, and his community, our community affairs staff, is excited to get out into the community and roll up our sleeves to organize with tenants, to organize with parents, and to organize with small businesses. And we know that small businesses is also a very big issue in this part of the district. We wanted to make sure to remind everyone that tomorrow he will be joining Assemblymember Danny O'Donnell at a housing justice panel, and that's at PS 75. Around May 10th, no, not around May 10th, on May 10th, he will join Congressman Espaillat for a town hall on the 2020 census. His office will have will be mobile for the next 2 weeks on the Upper West Side. We are currently in Inwood. Trust us, even for us, we feel that we are too far away from all of you, and we are working with central office to see how we can be closer to you. But real estate is expensive in the city, but we're having the conversation constantly with the central office. In the meantime, we'll have, for the next 2 Wednesdays, the senator will be available to you from 3 to 5 p.m. on April 17th and April 24th. You can sign up via social media or provide us with your email. Hopefully you sign in with your email when you came in to hear our specific locations. But again, that's April 17th and April 24th. Our office hosts Manhattan Legal Services for free tenant consult in our office every second and fourth Tuesday from 3 to 7 p.m. Please call us to reserve a spot. We're also partnering with the Met Council on Housing and Riverside Edgecombe Neighborhood Association, that's RENA, for tenant organizing in at-risk buildings. Join the Met Council for the free bi-weekly tenants' rights clinic in our building. Again, that's 5030 Broadway on the 6th floor conference room. You can get questions answered, empower yourself, and stand up for, to your landlord. In regards to the mobile office hours, most of them, it's 10 minutes. You don't have to make an appointment. You just show up and talk directly with the senator. He will probably have at least 1 or 2 staff members on hand to provide additional support. That's the bare bones of what's going on in the district. office and what we're doing, we do want to open it up to so we can hear from you some of the issues. We are aware of some of the issues. Our district, if the senator didn't go over it, is very long, and I know most of you know that it goes from Marble Hill down to Hell's Kitchen. So we do our best with our skeleton staff to cover community boards, cover CECs, precinct councils, the NYCHA public housing meetings, but we really want you to call us. If you know there's an event, if there's a session, if there's a block party where we need to meet with the people and find out what's going on, we implore you to let us know. Again, we're stretched thin, we try to catch everything, but sometimes things fall through the cracks, and we don't want things to fall through the cracks. It's going to happen, but we want to make every attempt to make sure it doesn't happen so that we are as present with you in your neighborhood, in your corner, on your block, in your PA, in your tenant association meeting, so that we understand what's going on, so that when the senator is up there fighting on your behalf, he has firsthand knowledge of what's going on with his constituents and how you feel. Do I dare say any questions? Any questions? Yes.
This is a good question. I just wanted to say.
Yes, the senator's here. If you want him to.
No, I just want to say he is being honored at Three Parks Democrat Club. He's being honored at their annual fundraiser on April 28th, Sunday. So.
Thank you. Where is it? Where is it going to be held? April 28th.
Held at Mexican Festival.
102nd Street and Broadway. Okay, thank you. Josh.
Senator Gottfried spoke about the passage of the New York Health Act in the Assembly. What is the status in the Senate?
In the Senate, we have an excellent champion in Senator Gustavo Rivera. It is a conversation that's being had every day. We've had legislative briefings. Well, he's had legislative briefings with his colleagues to make sure that the conversation is very front and center and alive in regards to getting it passed. The concern, I believe, in both houses is that because of the fiscal impact and the specifics, the complexities of it, they're not sure that it's something that can be done by the end of this session. And I think that's a very pragmatic approach, I suppose, that both the Assembly and the Senator Rivera are holding, but they know that it is something that must be done. We have advocates that come up regularly to Albany to make sure to remind the legislators that this is not something that can be placed on the back burner.
Could they not do what was done with fair elections, which was to pass it in principle and support, and then set up a commission of some kind to then implement?
So with fair elections, it was something that was definitely part of the budget process conversation that needed to happen. The commission was a result of not everyone can reach consensus. There are certain specifics that need to be ironed out, but let's honor that this was a big conversation in this budget process, and then it resulted in a commission. It's not something that any of the advocates ever had as a part of their platform. I do see, and we did hear in our office, that there was considerable backlash as to, hey, there's a commission, it sounds like it's watered down, it sounds like you're kicking the can down the road, but I believe it was the legislators' way of saying, maybe we're kicking it down the road, but we want to make sure it's on the road. We want to make sure that it's not completely left out of this conversation, so that something definitely happens. With the new, the Healthcare Act, that hasn't come up. That's the first time that I've heard an advocate say maybe a commission. Could they have done it? I don't think that conversation in terms of the Healthcare Act was in queue for them to say, let's have a commission. I think that the champions in the Assembly and the senators and in the Senate, Gottfried and Rivera respectively, I think they're pushing for, no, let's make this happen, not necessarily a commission. I don't know if that's a conversation that could start afterwards.
Can I ask on the same topic?
Yes, but I would like the senator to be next to me because
Gustavo Rivera has said that there are going to be hearings after
I don't know. As you know, we're back in the districts until we head back to Albany on the 29th. No, it's not going to be April. I don't think so, because some people are away and what have you and so forth. And even staff, I'm talking about central staff, because of the budget negotiations, they're like, one of the persons said he flew out the next day to Colorado because he hasn't seen his daughter in 3 months. Do you know what I mean? So I do think that Gustavo Rivera, if he said he's going to do that, that's going to happen. And I say to you that in listening to him talk to us in the conference, just amongst ourselves, and questions that we have, he is so knowledgeable and he works so hard that, in my opinion, even though I think that Bill Perkins, prior to Gustavo Rivera, had that particular bill, Gustavo, in my opinion, is great. I'm telling you. I mean, we couldn't ask someone, in my opinion, that was better than him as far as knowledge and being able to communicate with clarity on everything regarding that. But we all said that this is not going to be an easy thing, and it's going to take time. But as he said to us a long time ago, we have to continuously make progress. And one of the compliments is, as I said to you, we restored that $550 million, which was a big, big issue in this budgetary process.
And I think also that Andrew Cuomo was trying to push the healthcare thing into a commission to study it. That was going to be unclear who was going to be on it. And my understanding is that your budget did not include the commission, which is, I think, a good thing.
I think it's a good thing. Anytime, if you are the ones that putting the commission together, and we don't know who's going to be on the commission, and let's move the process along. That's why you have the Assembly, that's why you have the Senate, and you have the staff of both groups in order to work on it.
And we'll go back into and speak to Senator Rivera's office to try to get a sense of when it would happen in this part.
Hi, first of all, Senator, I'd like to thank you for your very frequent open forum town halls. They're so very important. Personally, I never went to one before until you became my senator, to be honest with you. I realize what I'm going to comment on is not on the agenda today, but this is an open forum and it's something that troubles me. Bicycle riders in New York City. I'm all for bikes being legitimate and having a lane, but I've been hit by bicycles twice. They run lights, they don't obey the traffic laws, they ride on the sidewalks. I've been a driver, I've been a bike rider, and a regular pedestrian and a passenger. I do not understand why that bicycle riders, whether they work for a messenger service or not, do not carry insurance, don't have licenses, and that the traffic lights, if they're taking, there's no consequence for the action. And it used to be rollerbladers were like bullets that running in between the cars, but now it's the bicycles and human beings who are pedestrians or animals. They have become they're in the most danger of anybody in the street. And I was wondering if that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. That's clearly an appropriate subject for all of us. And especially now with these bikes that can go up to 20-some miles per hour, they have the battery. And you do have to look. Some of them now that I notice at night, they have the lights, and some of them have bells also, which is a good thing. But they are supposed to follow the traffic and vehicle laws just like cars. They're supposed to. But you know that they don't. And you're mainly, I believe you're mainly talking about all of the delivery people. Is that correct? Right. Mainly.
And it's going to be too expensive for them to get insurance and everything for the messengers, but that is not our problem. Right. That is their problem. And thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, clearly that's a subject matter, and we're going to take note on that in order to make sure that we. And listen, I have a bike, and once, I mean, God was with me because I'm riding home on Fort Washington Avenue in the bike lane near the GWB, and someone opened their car door. And I yelled, "Oh!" And he said, "I'm sorry." He didn't mean it. And he yelled, "I'm sorry." But luckily, I was able to avoid him, and there was no cars coming. But that is, and I had on a helmet and everything, but it happened. So we have to all be collectively aware of our environment. Joanna, what's next? You go ahead.
Is there another question?
Yeah.
Can I ask that everyone just state your name so that we can get to know who you are? Sorry, I didn't ask the others, but we want to really get to know our constituents.
Okay, my name is Sharon Just, and we've actually spoken before about the Shashat. We met with the parents. I actually had 3 different things I was going to ask about. So I'll ask about the first one, which was the plastic bag. I'm an environmental engineer is my background. Plastic bags, good idea. Paper bag, 5-cent thing. I wanted to just ask I don't know if New York's maritime shipping tourist industry is required to have protective plates along the bottom of the boat, but if they are not, I was on a boat once where we were out sightseeing and it got to be very rough waters, and 100 water bottles flew off that deck and into the ocean. So if New York does not, I don't know if they do or not, but if they do not have requirement for bottom guardrails around all the boats, if you're looking at what New York is impacting environmentally. Anyway, that's one thing. Second, elevators in both subways and public schools. So all this discussion about tax for the signaling system on the subway, to me there's a huge gap in the lack of elevators, including here on the Upper West Side, where there's been a station shut for 6 months for renovation, yet an elevator wasn't put in.
Which one? What's
I think that was 86th or 110th. I think there were actually 2. To me, it should not, we should never be closing an elevator, a subway station in the entire New York City for 6 months unless we're going to retrofit it. It's ridiculous. It's almost 2020. And similarly in schools, very few percent-wise of schools. I'm at the computer school. We have an elevator in the building, but no way to get into the building unless you have a key, can open a big gate, have a second person with you. And I know you're at the state level, not here, but to me the subway funding, it's a state issue in that the subway system has ADA exceptions that were built in when ADA was passed, and it's time for that to change. And New York City should take the lead on its own to change that exception. And then the third, on the Shashat, which no one has brought up, but I'll just bring it up. The whole fight about the Shashat test is really driven by a lack of educational options that have significant levels of STEM level preparation, advanced calculus, advanced physics, advanced whatever. If you are sitting there as a parent of a high school student and you need that type of placement for your child because that's the path they want to be on, that less than 5% of New York City high schools even offer those AP classes. Less than 5%, including the Shashat schools. Before you go taking the children who are at 99th percentile and saying you have to come out of this school so these children can come in, and vice versa, and there's a mix. To me, the real issue is there needs to be an expansion of seats. There needs to be an expansion of seats, expand the number of seats, have some come in purely on Shashat so the parents who are in favor of testing and the kids who are excelling at testing can come in, and have some percent come in as top percent, but expand the seats. There would be no issue on district priority, no issue on Shashat if there were enough seats.
Thank you. John Liu, who is the chair of the subcommittee on New York City education, he had one hearing out in Queens. There's going to be one in our district. Is the date already set on that?
Yes, it is. I will look it up in my phone. It's in May, and it's a Thursday. Chris, do you remember PS 173, the meeting? It's on the slide. May 23rd.
So it's going to be at Public School 173, and that is on 173rd Street and Fort Washington Avenue. And John Liu and myself and maybe other members of the Education Committee will be there. Shelley Mayer, who is a state senator from Yonkers, part of Yonkers, she's the chair of the Education Committee. John is the chair of the subcommittee on New York City. I'm on the education committee. I'm on higher education committee. Yeah. So I will be there. And I've been asked in the campaign, when I was campaigning for the state senate, what's my position? I am open for expanding the seats and looking at a formula that will be more inclusive of New York City students. And I don't have the magic wand to tell you what that is, but I'm open. I'm not locked into one exam. That's me.
And also, I just want to add with the ADA for schools, I believe that in the 5-year capital plan for the city council, the city, they built in money for schools. I know that it's a very faulty process, and what they say is something different that eventually gets implemented, but we should look at, we should probably do a survey in our office as to the schools in our district and which ones are actually ADA accessible. Some have elevators in the building, but then there's no way to get in the building. So we have to look at how also the DOE is classifying these schools as being ADA accessible, because it's always like a language and definition with the DOE. And in regards to ADA accessibility for the subways, again, Senator Kennedy is coming, and that's definitely one of the things that Senator Kennedy has told our office, that they want us to figure out a forum where the community, our district, can come and speak and give feedback. We'll have that as in queue, as something that we will let his office know in advance, but definitely we will be very dutiful about making sure that we tell everyone here when those forums are happening.
And I do think that Andy Beaufort, he wants, we need more elevators. We need to get the funds to do it. And they've said, look, Boston is an old city. They have more elevators than we do. Why? You know, because it was something that they did, and we have to do it. And people said, well, you know, there are elevators. Well, hello, tomorrow I may be in a wheelchair and I want to be able to get around. So, you know, we just have to do it. I mean, obviously the issue is the resources to get it done, but that's a major issue.
So we want to conclude
with
looking ahead.
Go ahead.
We want to conclude with looking ahead. So the budget passed, but there's still a lot of work to do between now and the end of June. One of the major things someone's going to move it. One of the major things that we're looking to accomplish by June is housing justice. And that includes ending vacancy control, making preferential rents permanent, eliminating permanent rent hikes from MCIs, rent control relief, legislation to compel landlords to make court-ordered repairs. So that's a host of and more around housing justice. We also are looking, besides the MCI, there's something called the IAI, which is the individual apartment improvements that also are loopholes that landlords tend to use. We're also looking forward to be very assertive in getting Climate and Community Protection Act passed. This includes making New York fossil fuel free by 2050. The senator joins.
And there's a push, and I would like for it to be fossil free even before that.
2030.
There's advocates that are pushing for 2030. And yeah, and I'm just saying, the quicker we get there, the better off we'll be.
The more lives we save. Accountability and enforceable goals, fair labor standards, which is green jobs equal good jobs, and a piece of the conversation that is very intricate to the CCPA is racial and economic justice, and that has to be part of the conversation. Right now it's fragmented and not really they're reaching consensus when I say that, because the quicker that we make it about racial and economic justice, the better and stronger the plan will be, and the more allies we will have also.
And how many of you heard of the Green Light campaign? You know what that is, right? That means no matter who you are, whether you're a citizen or you're undocumented, everyone should have a driver's license. And so with the Green Light campaign, undocumented individuals will have to pass the driver's test, have insurance if they're going to have a car, just like everyone else. And that the advocates and the research is that New York City, New York State will gain a lot of money as a result of that. It will be safer and better security overall for everyone. So right now, sometimes you hear that there's an accident, right, that occurs, and somebody's hit, or you run into a house, and the person gets out of the car, and what do? They run. And so why are people that get in an accident are running? Why are they running? To get away. And so even the farm workers, the farm owners, they want the farm workers to be able to drive. And right now, the undocumented ones cannot drive. I told you I live right near the George Washington Bridge, and one of the people that hangs out on the corner constantly, he told me, this was on a Friday when traffic is real bad going to the bridge. A woman got hit by a car, and she got up, and then she ran down into the subway. And I said, what? She got hit by a car, and she got up and ran down into the subway. Why? Why do you think? She was undocumented. The police would come, if they would ask her if she would need to go to the hospital. She's not willing to take the chance. That's bad. That's not good at all. So there's a flyer out on that, and if you're interested in seeing the flyers, all of the benefits of the Green Light campaign, I'll be glad to email it to anyone that may want the whole thing. Yes, question on that.
I don't understand what you just said in a sense, because in order to register a vehicle, you've got to have the insurance card. So how do these undocumented or illegal immigrants how can they register the vehicle without insurance? That's my question.
No. Well, no, they will, if they have a driver's license, and then as you know right now, they have several different gradations of driver's license.
But my question is, if they're undocumented,
but
they would at least have to have insurance to register.
Right, they will have a driver's license.
Right, but I'm saying now in order to have the vehicle registered, you got to have insurance.
Right.
So why are you saying that they don't have insurance?
Well, if they, in my opinion, somehow, that's why I'm saying that I've seen people, run when they get into an accident.
Stolen vehicle.
No, it's a borrowed
No.
car. Yeah.
No, say that again?
It could be
Right. Right.
with permission.
Right. So, but here's the thing. The thing is that once you have a driver's license, you purchase a car, then you can get insurance. And so that will be overall good for all of us, keep us safer, more secure, raise money for the state of New York and everything like that. I think that that's a good thing.
So
And if anybody wants those flyers, I'll be glad to email them to you, okay? Just make sure you communicate that to Gwendolyn or Leslie over there. Go ahead.
So I'm going to speed through the just in the interest of time, what's remaining in regards to the look ahead. So cannabis legalization. Cannabis legalization is something that we need to get right. We need to minimize interactions with the criminal justice system, provide automatic expungement, state-level infrastructure with local control, taxation, and regulation to benefit marginalized communities. There's going to be a great deal of conversation around this. We want to hear from our community as we start shaping this policy before the end of June. We're also, in regards to the education reforms, we're looking at a charter school transparency bill. Right now, charter schools don't have enough transparency as to how they're using our public funding and how, when it comes to disciplinary action, when it comes to enrolling students with IEPs, students with special needs, or students who are English language learners. EPP for school bus drivers is really about labor law. It's protecting employee protection provision and ending high-stakes testing. The senator already spoke about Green Light. The Green Light program, which again includes making our streets safer, lowers insurance burdens, helps our undocumented friends make a living. And Farm Workers Bill of Rights, the senator spoke about, it's something that we're focusing on before the end of June. This mandates 1 day of rest per week Right now, they don't have the right to rest, not even 1 day a week. Employers must pay overtime. It gives farm workers the right to form a union and collectively bargain, and it makes farm workers eligible for workers' compensation. Even though it's not a big issue here in the city, we do have a lot of farmers markets, and it's an issue in regards to human rights and labor rights. Last but not least, that's it. We're thanking our host. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. If there are any final burning questions that you want to ask, please ask the senator. I will, of course, support the senator in the responses. We thank you for coming out on a Sunday. There's coffee, there's cookies. Yes, thank you so much.